Imagine for a second that everyone had a magical cube in their pockets. With the right permutation, you could materialize all kinds of food or drink. At first, there was only one cube in existence and nobody knew what it did, until after a year of fiddling with the thing, someone found the permutation for water. After that, they started to quickly figure out how to make more things like tea and avocados and all kinds of vegetables. Over several years, they then figured out how to manufacture the cubes efficiently and inexpensively, and with a lot more cubes and plenty of people to play with them, things rapidly progressed to the point where they were making more complex things like kimchi, butter, or yogurt. Cube users were increasing exponentially, and the world was excited about this. It was going to cure world hunger. Standard of living would increase across the globe. Everyone would have infinite access to healthy foods. A couple days later, beer was added to the list. Then a bunch of hard liquors came out, and a few people became slightly worried about the whole situation. Then a couple weeks later, two guys from Virginia show up and say, "Hey, we just made cocaine with the cube." For the first time for most of these people, they were in this situation where they had access to a huge variety of choices at all moments during the day. They could do anything from having the highest quality, nourishing meal to deciding to add just one or two cookies to their lunch, or they could say, work's not going so well, maybe a spot of cocaine would help. And that's kind of what we have with the internet. Okay, it's unrealistic to say you get pathologically addicted to the internet as fast as you would to cocaine, but just as the mystical cube people can choose to nourish or poison their bodies at any point in the day, the internet allows us to subject our brains to information that enriches our intellect and gives us new perspectives, or we can choose streams of information that leave us thinking, what have I been doing the past 30 minutes? The thing is, the problem goes deeper than just the minutes you lose to Twitter, Facebook, or Reddit. The way you use the internet literally changes your brain's default way of operating, and part of it has to do with how intimately your brain interacts with tools. A 2010 research article from the Association of Psychological Science found that when you're using a tool, your brain understands the tool not as something you are manipulating with your hands, but actually as if it were a part of your body. For example, if you have someone hold a marker, then you could directly ask their brain to describe their right hand. Their brain might say something like, "I have 6 rods coming out of a meat-filled slab. 5 of the rods are bendable, and 3 of them are attached to a rigid, meatless rod." Kind of like you are what you eat. From your brain's perspective, you are what you use. But what about more abstract tools? In Nicholas Carr's book, The Shallows, which is all about how the internet affects your brain, he explains how different tools change our perception of the world and the actual way we think, not just what we think about. One example is the very simple and useful tool that is the map. Without the map, people would rely on their sight as well as their understanding of intricate smells and sounds to create a 3D landscape in their minds. The map then simplifies this complex process down to just visualizing your position in space as a point on a 2D plane. Another example is how originally our perception of time was an understanding of how cycles and rhythms of the natural world relate to each other. With the advent of the mechanical clock, we began to look at our day as just a compilation of neatly segmented slices of time. Even something as simple as the spaces between words can be considered a tool that changes the way we use our brains. For a while, there were no spaces between words, and everything was just jammed together, so you had to read the text out loud to see where one word began and another ended. Putting spaces between words made the task of reading much easier, to the point that people could read silently to themselves for much longer stretches of time. Because people now had something they could engage with and stay concentrated on for hours at a time, deep focus became a more widespread skill. However, the recent internet environment is one that wires people's brains for enhanced distractibility. At all times, you have multiple streams of information in the forms of notifications, advertisements, and messages from your friends, all things that you can redirect your attention to. Our brains are naturally on the alert for new information, and the more we're exposed to this kind of virtual interface, the more our brain decides to rewire itself to respond to and even crave these internet distractions. Try and think about how long you usually stay on one tab, one application, or one video at a time. Might be no longer than a couple minutes, or even a few seconds. You might even have flipped over to Facebook in just the course of this video. I've even found myself opening up Reddit on my phone, while watching a movie on my TV that I'm enjoying. I'm already entertained, so what am I doing? You can exercise or let atrophy different modes of thinking. Maybe at some point, you finally set some time aside to work on that big project you've been meaning to do, only to find yourself feeling uncomfortable and asking yourself, why can't I focus? The reason is the same as why most people can't sign their names with their left hand. Alright, so what if we're gearing our brains to be distracted? Maybe things take a little bit longer to do. That's not that terrible. The problem with getting distracted like this has to do with how your short term memory processing works. Your brain, ironically, can be compared to a web browser. For example, when you're shopping on Amazon, you might want to go back a couple pages to double check the price of something. You can do this by clicking the back button because the web browser stores those pages in its recent history. When you're doing something like reading a book, your brain is processing and storing the information in short-term memory so it can relate the paragraph you're reading to the last couple paragraphs you just read. If you get distracted by a text message while you're reading, you might find that when you go back to the sentence you were just on, you're asking, wait, who are they talking about? This is because getting distracted and shifting your attention to the text message is like clearing your recent browser history. Your brain can't hit the back button to review what it just read because it dumped what was in the short-term memory so it could focus on the text message. So you end up having to reread the last paragraph or two. Being distracted like this gets in the way of the insightful, creative thinking necessary to complete fulfilling and ambitious tasks. You process information in the short-term memory like this when you're doing anything from working on a business idea to practicing piano or writing an article. With enough time and uninterrupted focus, the information slowly trickles from your conscious short-term memory to your subconscious long-term memory. And it's only when the information is in the long-term memory that you can make insightful connections with other pieces of information you've picked up in the past. The reason you get those aha moments and creative insights out of the blue is because in the background, your subconscious long-term memory is processing new and old bits of information and making connections between them. When something distracts you and pulls your focus from the task at hand, this transfer of information from short-term to long-term memory gets interrupted.
Attention is the key to the entire process of transferring information into long-term memory and creating connections.
To be truly productive and successful professionally or creatively in this competitive and fast-moving world, you need to set up long blocks of time where you can work completely uninterrupted, and you'll need to have developed a mind where distraction is not the default mode. When people are picking out what to eat, they kind of have it in the back of their mind how that piece of food is going to change their body. They can expect that while the processed junk food does taste good, it will make them gain weight and have less energy. But I don't think enough people are thinking, is the way I'm about to use my smartphone right now going to change my brain's default setting to be more focused or more distracted? Looking at a couple memes for 5 minutes when you get a quick break from work probably doesn't feel like a big deal, and it probably isn't. Then again, your brain has the annoying ability to quickly habituate towards activity that provide enjoyment for very little energy. Looking back on my cube analogy, cocaine may seem like too intense of an example for the bad aspects of the internet. Well, research has shown that the difficulty with cocaine isn't just that it rewires your pleasure center to make you addicted to it. Cocaine actually damages the dendrites of the neurons in the prefrontal cortex. This is the area of the brain that is responsible for executive control. Executive control is essentially the ability to stay rational, maintain focus, and exert willpower in order to achieve some sort of long-term goal. This means that at the same time one area of the addict's brain is wired to crave cocaine, the area that he needs to rely on to resist these cravings is damaged. It's this kind of rewiring of the brain that interferes with your ability to reach your personal potential that I'm pointing to when I make the comparison to certain negative aspects of the internet. While it happens slowly, these quick or instant bursts of new and interesting information from the internet can become a slippery slope into a brain that enjoys and desires distraction and prefers instant gratification. Also, consider this. In the cases of people who are truly addicted to the internet, they also have severely reduced executive function, similar to the cocaine addicts. In many ways, the internet is an incredibly useful and helpful tool, but a deeper understanding of which aspects of the internet affect your brain in what ways is necessary to modify your usage in a way that keeps your brain functioning the way you want it to. We'll be looking at this more in depth soon, so stick around.